A newly released intelligence report from the Pentagon shows that the U.S. government knew that supporting jihadists in the fight against Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad would produce a fundamentalist Islamic State in Eastern Syria, and that Arab Emirates' supposed anti-ISIS coalition knowingly backed ISIS and other Islamic terrorists for precisely that purpose. The heavily redacted Defense Department report, obtained by watchdog Judicial Watch via a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, shows once again that, contrary to the false narrative peddled by the establishment press, the rise of the savage terror group known as ISIS was actually deliberate policy. Now, the fruits of that plot are becoming clearer as the body count continues to skyrocket. The 2012 Defense Intelligence Agency report is very blunt about the objectives. The West, Gulf countries, the Islamic regimes ruling Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, etc., and Turkey support the Syrian opposition, it explains, adding that, as the New American reported at the time, al-Qaeda supported the Syrian uprising from the beginning as well. There is the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist, fundamentalist Islam, principality in Eastern Syria, Hasaka and Der Zor, and this is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want, in order to isolate the Syrian regime. Emphasis added. Of course, that is also exactly what happened when ISIS declared the establishment of its caliphate in Eastern Syria and parts of Iraq. The Der report also exposes the lies propagated by the Obama administration, senior U.S. lawmakers, and foreign leaders to dupe Americans into allowing the U.S. government to support non-existent moderate rebels in Syria. According to the classified document, which was released by a court order, U.S. authorities were well aware of the fact that, as reported by the New American shortly after it began, the rebellion against Assad was being led by radical jihadists, including many of the same forces the U.S. government was ostensibly fighting against in the terror war. The Salafist, the Muslim Brotherhood, and al-Qaeda in Iraq are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria, stated the report, which was dated August 12, 2012, long after the New American and other media outlets exposed that same fact. The Defense Department's intelligence analysts also warned of the consequences all of the machinations could have on Iraq. This creates the ideal atmosphere for al-Qaeda Iraq to return to its old pockets in Mosul and Ramadi, and will provide a renewed momentum under the presumption of unifying the jihad among Sunni Iraq and Syria, and the rest of the Sunnis in the Arab world against what it considers one enemy, the dissenters, the report explained, pointing to two cities in Iraq that are now under ISIS control. Islamic State in Iraq could also declare an Islamic State through its union with other terrorist organizations in Iraq and Syria, which will create grave danger in regards to unifying Iraq and the protection of its territory. The New American magazine and many other sources have been reporting much of that information almost since the start of the Western establishment-backed rebellion against the Syrian regime. However, some analysts are now calling the Der report a smoking gun. Among other points, the documents offer further proof that the rise of ISIS, due largely to the foreign policy of the Obama administration and its allies, was not the result of an accident or stupidity but of deliberate planning. However, Vice President Joe Biden and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Martin Dempsey had already let the cat at least partially out of the bag. Speaking at Harvard last year, Biden directly contradicted the Obama administration's propaganda about arming moderate rebels in Syria. The fact is, the ability to identify a moderate middle in Syria, there was no moderate middle, he explained, adding that Obama's anti-ISIS coalition had armed, trained, and funded al-Qaeda and ISIS to wage war on Assad. General Dempsey, meanwhile, responding to a question by pro-Syrian jihad Senator Lindsey Graham, r-s.c. about U.S. allies supporting ISIS, explained, "I know of major Arab allies who fund them. Of course, the CIA, the U.S. Defense Department, and the U.S. State Department were also instrumental in fomenting the rise of ISIS. Similarly, as is now common knowledge, the Obama administration, acting under United Nations orders rather than a declaration of war from Congress as required by the Constitution, backed self-styled al-Qaeda leaders in the war against Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Analysts and even top U.S. military officials blasted it as switching sides in the terror war. The fruits in Libya are clear, too. The nation has become what Senator Rand Paul referred to as a jihadist wonderland, a failed state in which terrorist groups run wild. Gaddafi, of course, despite being a brutal dictator, was a U.S. government ally in its terror war prior to being targeted for regime change and summary execution by Western-backed jihadists. Other newly released official U.S. documents obtained by Judicial Watch also show that the Obama administration was fully aware that weapons were being shipped from Benghazi to Syrian jihadists, another story that the alternative media broke years ago. The U.S. government reports also show that the Obama administration knew the assault on the secret U.S. compound in the Libyan city was a well-planned terror attack, even as officials were falsely claiming otherwise on television. These documents are jaw-dropping, said Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. No wonder we had to file more FOIA lawsuits and wait over 2 years for them. If the American people had known the truth that Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton and other top administration officials knew that the Benghazi attack was an al-Qaeda terrorist attack from the get-go and yet lied and covered this fact up, Mitt Romney might very well be president, he said, adding that the documents prove an ongoing cover-up surrounding Benghazi. And why would the Obama administration continue to support the Muslim Brotherhood even after it knew it was tied to the Benghazi terrorist attack and to al-Qaeda? These documents also point to connection between the collapse in Libya and the ISIS war and confirm that the US knew remarkable details about the transfer of arms from Benghazi to Syrian jihadists. Unsurprisingly, while the explosive revelations are receiving a great deal of attention in the alternative press, much of which had already been exposing the machinations for years, the establishment media has barely uttered a word about it. Zurich, InfoWars, The Levant Report, Lou Rockwell, The Ron Paul Liberty Report and others have all highlighted the contents. In the mainstream press, though, the only notable exception to the bizarre silence was the UK Sunday Times, which reported on May 24 that the DR report has prompted accusations that President Barack Obama lied when he claimed to have been blindsided by an intelligence failure after ISIS swept into Iraq early last year. Analysts suggested that the media's silence may be related to the establishment press's bizarre parroting of outlandish and easily discredited Obama administration talking points in the run-up to the attempted regime change war on Syria. Throughout the early years of the Syria crisis, the US and UK governments and almost universally the West's mainstream media promoted Syria's rebels as moderate, liberal, secular, democratic, and therefore deserving of the West's support. Former British Army and Metropolitan Police counter-terrorism intelligence officer Charles Shoebridge told Nafis Ahmed within Surge Intelligence. Given that these documents wholly undermine this assessment, it is significant that the West's media has now, despite their immense significance, almost entirely ignored them. The DR document was widely circulated throughout the U.S. government, the State Department, Central Command, the Department of Homeland Security, the CIA, the FBI, and other agencies would have all seen it, according to media reports. That means its contents, and therefore, the engineered rise of the Islamic State, ISIS, to isolate Assad, would not have been a surprise to U.S. officials. In other words, in addition to supporting the most violent and barbaric jihadists on the planet while ostensibly waging a liberty-crushing terror war, top-level government officials have been lying to the American people and the world. It is time for the perpetrators to be held accountable.